al die moralistische financiers. En toen dat niet lukte, ging hij zelf maar. Paul Verhoeven vertrok naar de States. Werd rijk, maar bleef onbegrepen. Seks, actie en geweld, dat zijn zijn handelsmerken en hij koestert ze.
Goed is niet interessant, kwaad ook niet. Maar het is het grensgebied waarin de meeste mensen hun leven slijten dat hem fascineert. Ook in zijn laatste film Basic Instinct, die hoe omstreden ook in Amerika morgenavond wel mooi het filmfestival in Cannes opent. Oscar van der Kroon in gesprek met een getergde filmmaker.
De film heeft te maken met evil, met kwaad. In mijn leven weet ik eigenlijk niet wat goed en kwaad is. Ik ben niet zo moeilijk met seks eigenlijk. Huh? You shoot her, and you say the Nicky line, you come up with the Nicky line, and then till the end, and then you walk out again, and just walk till the end, somewhere there. Ik vond het heel leuk om een vrouw te portretteren wat uiterst ongewoon is, die sterk is en de zaak controleert, en die niet de slachtoffer van mannen is, maar de mannen zijn eerder slachtoffer van haar, die een sterke vrouwenrol die centraal in een film staat, dat is uiterst ongewoon.
I'm not gonna confess all my secrets, Nick, just because I have an orgasm. You won't learn anything I don't want you to know.
Yes, I will. And I'll nail you.
No, you'll just fall in love with me.
I'm in love with you already. But I'll nail you anyway.
Ik heb er niet veel aan toegevoegd. Ik heb het script gefilmd zoals het er stond eigenlijk. Ik heb nog nooit een script in mijn leven zo letterlijk gefilmd als Basic Instinct. Eigenlijk zeg maar van de eerste letter tot de laatste letter. Dialoog woord voor woord en scènebeschrijvingen. Eigenlijk ook shot pro shot. Er zijn natuurlijk een aantal dingen die erin zitten die dan, waarvan je kan zeggen die zijn typisch mij. Maar dat zijn meer incidenten. Ik neem aan dat de scène waar Sharon ondervraagd wordt, waar ze de benen zo zit en daarna de benen zo over elkaar haalt. En dat je merkt dat ze hier niks aan heeft. Dat is een typische Paul Verhoeven-stijl. Waarschijnlijk zo wordt het door de kritiek geïnterpreteerd. If you can glamorize the evil somehow, that seems to be possible. And I think because people know in their hearts, they're all partly protected.
Glitzy exploitation, or good enough to be worth protesting about? We profile China's most successful painter. As every American already knows, is a thriller full of steamy sex and a vision of lesbian and bisexual women as deranged killers that has had the gay community up in arms. Despite, or perhaps because of the criticism, the film has been a raging box office success, grossing $78 million in the 38 days since it opened. So will we here in Britain protest and pay to the same degree? We'll be discussing that and other things in a moment. But first, a look at the film itself and the story behind it.
You working on another book?
Yes, I am.
It must really be something making stuff up all the time.
Yeah, it teaches you to lie.
How's that?
You make stuff up, it has to be believable. It's called suspension of disbelief.
I like that. Suspension of disbelief.
What's your new book about?
A detective, he falls for the wrong woman.
What happens?
She kills him.
Basic Instinct sees Michael Douglas returning to the streets of San Francisco, this time as Detective Curran, investigating the brutal murder of a rock star found in bed with multiple ice pick wounds. His girlfriend, the bisexual novelist Catherine Trammell, is the prime suspect.
Would you tell us the nature of your relationship with Mr. Boz?
I had sex with him for about 1.5 years. I liked having sex with him. He wasn't afraid of experimenting. I like men like that. Men who give me pleasure. He gave me a lot of pleasure.
you ever engage in any sadomasochistic activity?
Exactly what did you have in mind, Mr. Corelli?
Not surprisingly, when Trammell makes a play for our detective, he joins business with pleasure and they end up in bed. But they are not alone. And with the introduction of Trammell's lover, Roxy, another gay suspect is added to the list.
If you don't leave her alone, I'll kill you.
Let me ask you something, Rocky. Man to man. I think she's the of the century. What do you think? How long you been here? You like watching, don't you?
She likes me to watch.
Basic Instinct is, to my opinion, a movie about evil. There is an undercurrent in the whole movie of evil, and it's the dark side of humanity.
The first sniff of controversy over the film came when director Paul Verhoeven asked writer Joe Esterhaus to add lesbian love scenes to his $3 million script. Esterhaus refused and quit.
I know that had I not walked off, if I would have agreed to make the changes that Paul would have agreed to, that script would have been completely eviscerated. It would have turned into something horrible, and I would have been a party to it.
Despite a public reconciliation, round 2 of the controversy started when lesbian and gay activists got hold of a copy of the script. Already infuriated by negative portrayals of homosexuality in Hollywood blockbusters such as Silence of the Lambs and JFK, they set out to make their voices heard by trying to disrupt the filming. Writer Joe Esterhaus responded by meeting some of his critics and revising his script with a reported 37 alterations.
They were changes that I felt didn't hurt the material, that they wouldn't hurt the plot or the construction. I felt that the movie was not homophobic and feel to this day that it's not homophobic, but that there were certain insensitivities in it which could have been corrected. Paul and Michael and Carolco felt and feel very adamantly that they're not going to make any changes.
So the script remained unchanged and round 3 followed. Lesbian and gay activists continued to demonstrate against the film. At the Oscar ceremonies and picketing cinemas where it was showing, turning it once again into a media event. Director Verhoeven remained unrepentant.
I think when you look at the movie, you will, I think everybody that goes in open-minded will see that this movie is never has not any homophobic elements, that the gay characters, the bisexual characters in the movie are, I would say, great. They are, and that the bisexuality, the lesbianism in the movie is just a plot point, meaning to me that sexuality, in whatever form, heterosexuality, bisexuality, or homosexuality, is part of human life, and we should just accept it. And because it's so normal, whatever preference people have, we can use it as a plot point. We don't have to make an issue of homosexuality.
Well, with me to discuss Basic Instinct are the film critic and editor of Good Times, Amanda Lipman, Adam Mars-Jones of The Independent, and The Observer journalist Yvonne Roberts. Adam, you've seen the film now. Do you understand what everyone's so fed up about?
Well, I think the controversy began long before the film. It used to be about women as victims, if you remember Dressed to Kill. Now it's women as villains. So in a way, the arguments are well prepared. There have been simmerings in the past, but this is just the right movie to bring them to a rolling boil. It's 2 hours of gender libels, and it's a good film to make an issue of.
Amanda?
Well, I have to say that I don't think that the fact that you have 3 women in the film who are bisexual and may or may not be psychos, and some of them certainly are, means that you're going to walk away from the film saying, oh, well, every bisexual woman in the world is a psycho. I don't think it's the kind of film that... These people aren't stereotypes. How many bisexual psychos do you know? I don't know any. I don't think the film's about stereotypes at all. I think it's about kind of characters that just don't exist. It is a complete fantasy film.
So you think, therefore, it has no danger because it's so incredible
well,
and
that's
unbelievable?
Right, exactly.
Right,
yeah.
Yvonne?
I don't think the film has a danger, but I think it's important for people to go and see it literally with their eyes open. To me, the bisexuality or homosexuality is less intrusive, really, on my enjoyment than the idea that what makes good cinema is evil women. We've had evil women years and years and years on. What we have here is a whole six-pack. There isn't a single woman in this whole film that isn't not only a killer. There's a maid. There's a maid who's invisible.
It's very brief.
And is not eligible for sex because she weighs 154 pounds and is 55 years old, which is another kind of offensive thing about the film. But every single woman is a killer, or a killer without reason. We never know why these women arbitrarily kill. And what's interesting, they always kill those closest to them, their children, their lovers. You know, the message over and over again, women are not to be trusted. We also have one of every kind of woman. We have a housewife, we have a professional woman, we have a creative woman.
So you're saying this is kind of random misogyny rather than very much to do with kind of sexual orientation?
I think it's quite funny. I mean, if you begin to perceive it in that way, it becomes quite funny because you think, who's going to turn up next? You know, the mother-in-law.
It's certainly true that the screening I saw, and you were sitting next to me, a lot of people laughed.
Yeah.
But does that make it a film that we shouldn't still be protesting about?
Well,
Adam?
there is a bit of depth to the argument. One of the points made by the protesters against the movie is that neutral portrayals of, say, lesbians are cut from Steve Martin's LA Story. Sequences which established that his neighbors were gay women were cut because audiences didn't like them. And in a world that does consist entirely of fantasy, if neutral fantasy is removed and only poisonous fantasy remains, then yes, I think you have to say there is concern.
So are you saying that in some way we have to see the protest against Basic Instinct in a context, and that this is the kind of logical conclusion of activists feeling very fed up with films like JFK and Silence of the Lambs and other
Apart from
things?
anything else, the protest against the film has a lucidity of narrative structure that the film can't match. That there was intervention before, during, and after with a group called Catherine Did It for some mischievous reason.
What, that's an attempt to undermine it by telling us
absolutely,
who did
by
it?
saying suspense is what this film is about. We remove the suspense. We have power. We have power to blow the whistle on your story. And to the extent you're telling a story about us or people like us, we can do that. Watch us do it. So there's been a lot of intervention. I don't think it's been like the protest in America against Bret Easton Ellis's novel American Psycho, which did, I think, boost that novel. I think a film is a much more tremulously wanting to be liked organism. It will get away with what it'll get away with. And I think from this year on, Hollywood movie makers will think twice against about using this.
But it has made a lot more people go and see it. I mean, $78 million in 38 days or whatever it is. Loads of people have gone to see it because there's been a controversy. You know, if Carolco had wanted to market the film, they couldn't have thought of a better thing themselves.
But wait a minute, aren't they also going to see it because it has one hell of a cast in all senses of the word? It doesn't only have Michael Douglas taking off his clothes a lot, it has Sharon Stone, who has her clothes off most of the time, and then it has Paul Verhoeven, who's, you know, RoboCop fame, and it has Joe Esterhaus, who everybody knows to be the highest paid scriptwriter in the country.
Well,
it had a hell of a...
Of course that's true, but there are plenty of films with good casts that go straight to video. Without that kind of hype.
There is, I think, an innocence behind the film in that I think Joe Esterhaus, who is not a great writer by Dickens standards, decided to reverse the roles of Jagged Edge, which is about a woman involved with a man who may be a murderer. And we really care about whether she's involved with a murder or not. But you can't just transpose it and have it work the same way, because by and large, men's fears of women are unfounded and women's fears of men are founded. It's as simple as that.
But this is a classic catalogue of men's fears of women, too. I mean, the film is basically a sort of hymn to heterosexuality, and the one woman who's only gay dies without any line to die with. One woman who's gay but has been to bed with Michael Douglas dies claiming that she loved only him. And the one who survives seems to do so because she had orgasms with Michael Douglas and has been brought back into the heterosexual fold.
But there are also all sorts of other male fears there, like the women isolate Mike Douglas from his mates, you know, so the woman takes you away. The woman invades his mind, so she also knows everything about him. The woman undermines his virility because, you know, it's just, as I said, it becomes funny because one cliche after another, you think, where's the next one coming from? And sure enough, it comes.
But in that case, haven't we just defeated our arguments and brought Amanda's argument to the fore? If it's that funny, if it's that obvious, if it's that crude, it doesn't matter, does it?
No, and I think in addition, you have to say whatever, you know, you might feel about the women in it, what about being misogynist? What about the man? He's such a schmuck, the Michael Douglas character. He's stupid.
No, I don't think he's meant to be.
He's meant to be.
I think what actually happens is because the women are so horrific, this man, who's actually rather a nasty man, who goes around killing people, boozing, taking cocaine when he's on duty. His wife commits suicide because of his activities. Turns out to be a sort of good guy in relative terms.
In what way?
Because he actually stays with the case, finishes the case, gets the girl, loses his best friend.
And
I mean,
it's so
all this
stupid that
artificial
3
sympathy.
times when evidence is given to him who's done the actual murders, he doesn't know.
But as Catherine, the writer, says, you know, it's a suspension of belief, and I think by the time the audience is with him, I mean, somebody said on the radio today that it's actually libido cop, because it is actually about how many times Michael Douglas can sort of get it up in a short period of time.
There'd been anything like this amount of attention paid to a little film called Sea of Love with Al Pacino, which managed to be about misogyny rather than embodying misogyny. It was about men's fear of women, and it seemed to be about a woman who killed man.
And I have to say, it was also a much better thriller, and a great deal of it has been ripped off to make this plot.
Absolutely, but that was a film about characters, about people, about emotions, about social status, about all kinds of things. This is a film with fantastic characters in it, and a kind of wham-bam plot that's incredibly slickly done, and I thought incredibly well done, and it's not really about people.
If you care about thrillers, though, this seems to be blunting all the best aspects of what thrillers should be about, because you're left with so many loose ends. You're left with there's no redemption in these characters. I think there's no development in these characters, and you think in the end, well, so what? I mean, you do get a couple of cheap thrills, but you're not left with a kind of lasting image or a puzzle that you want to see resolved, or you know, that sense of satisfaction that comes from seeing a good thriller.
Very briefly, do you think it's to do with the kind of business here that it did in America? I don't know.
I don't think so. In any case, it'll be forgotten, but the controversy will remain interesting.
Great. Amanda Littman, Alan Mars-Jones, and Yvonne Roberts, thank you all very much. And Basic Instinct, should you now decide to see it, opens on Friday. Like all artists in China since the revolution.
This was Escape. And